morning, everyone. Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me to be in this panel. And thanks for giving a warning also, Colleen, that you will strictly stick to time. But let me give a little note from my side that this is a huge presentation, but I'll try my best to cut it down. We are talking about the World Drug Report, and it has 6 volumes. And it's too difficult to condense it. I have tried my best to bring it to, some form, but I will focus on the important steps. So, World Drug Report 2023 is usually World Drug Reports are published on the June 26th. This year's World Drug Day theme was People First, Stop Stigma and Discrimination and Strengthen Prevention. So let me begin by saying that inequalities are increasing health problems associated with drug use. Drug use continues to be high worldwide. 1 in every 17 people worldwide had used drug in 2021, 23% more than a decade earlier. The estimated number of users grew from 240 million in 2011 to 296 million in 2021. This is a 23% increase. Cannabis continues to be the most used drug, with an estimated 219 million users. In 2021, 36 million people had used amphetamines, and 22 million had used cocaine, and 20 million had used ecstasy type of substances. The proportion of female drug users is higher in the case of amphetamine type stimulants. Opioids continue to be the group of substances with the highest contribution to severe drug-related harm, including fatal overdoses. An estimated 60 million people engaged in non-medical opioid use in 2021. 31.5 million of whom used opiates, mainly heroin. Some technological challenges. Okay. Like I said before, opioids continue to be the main drug that impacts the global burden of disease, where cannabis is reported by large the share of the drug use in most concerned in the disorders. So if you look at the bars at the left-hand side, and you can see the green ones are cannabis. You can see it very much there in the region in Africa. And you can also see significantly in East Africa, opioids is there. And in Southern Africa, also opioids is there, also in North Africa. And Western Central Africa, the bar is growing. So you also can see this, new psychotic substances, which is also prevalent in Africa region. The new data that has put the estimate of people who inject drugs in 2021 at 13.2 million people. They were using drugs in 2021. This estimate is 18% higher than in 2020. So the risk of acquiring HIV is 35 times higher for those who inject drugs than those who do not. The joint UNODC, WHO, UNAIDS, and the World Bank global estimate for people who inject drugs living with HIV is nearly 12%. So 1.6 million, that is 1 in 8 people injecting drugs is living with HIV. Injecting drug use is one of the important factors for driving the global epidemic of hepatitis C, with the WHO estimating 23% of the new hepatitis C infections are attributable to unsafe injecting. In the case of drugs, there are more men than women injecting drugs. Men are 5 more times likely than women to inject drugs. This is based on a limited data that has been obtained from 18 countries, whereas women who inject drugs are 1.2 times more likely than men to be living with HIV. So yesterday our Honorable former President also mentioned about this. There is large inequalities that remain with regard to pharmaceutical opioids for medical consumption. So it is there is overall there is a 40-fold difference in the availability of opioids per capita for pain management and palliative care between high income and low and middle income countries. Some 86% of the world's population live without adequate access to pharmaceutical opioids for pain relief and care. Some progress has been made in the recent years with regard to making available methadone and buprenorphine over the last 2 decades. They are not only used as analgesics, but also used as opioid agonist medication. Despite these positive developments, there remains an extremely wide diversity in the availability of opioids for medical purposes. When it comes to the barriers for treatment to women, an estimated 39.5 million people worldwide were suffering from drug use disorders in 2021. Only 1 in 5 people with the drug use disorders receive drug treatment. This is really concerning. Barriers in accessing treatment are multiple, but women are most affected. Almost 1 in 2 users of amphetamine type stimulants is a woman. But only 1 in 4 people in treatment is a woman. In addition to the family expectations and responsibilities that women face, women may experience further barriers in accessing treatment. And women who use drugs also may be part of certain groups who are survivors of gender-based violence or sex workers or people in prisons or ethnic minorities. Young people, obviously, needless to say, Africa has a very young population. Out of the 1.3 billion population, around 50% are less than 20 years old. In 2021, 5.3% of 15 to 16-year-olds worldwide, 13.5 million had used cannabis. Young people. In most regions, the proportion of the adolescents using the drug is higher than in the general population. The use of new psychotic substances, psychoactive substances, is generally higher among school students than among the general population. Like we all know, sometimes there is not enough data that is available for us to really clearly share this. In Africa, 70% of those in treatment are under the age of 35. This is just a map to show the trafficking routes. I'm not going to too much talk about it, but I thought it's worth just putting it on the screen for you to have a look at. The big arrows really indicate the volume flow of heroin from one region to the other. You can also look at Africa. It also is heroin comes into Southern Africa region through the southern route. And when it comes to cocaine and cannabis trafficking routes, you can also see, lots traversing through the Africa region. And many a times, drugs are also spilled over or they become destination points and they are also sold and consumed. So the report also shares that there is availability of cocaine in the Africa region. The another thing that I would like to mention is the world is currently experiencing prolonged surge in both supply and demand of cocaine. There is a marked increase from 2020. So I looks like I have only 5 minutes. I may have to rush. I have a couple of more slides. I'll try my best. But I don't want to miss out. These are important points. Okay. The point is cocaine users also have grown significantly, and it has also found markets in Africa. And if you look at these dots, you can clearly identify that cocaine is also found a way to Africa, and it is also available. And methamphetamine continues to expand beyond the traditional markets. And earlier it used to be concentrated in East and Southeast Asia, North America. Now we can find the manufacture of methamphetamine is not only restricted to those established markets, but with the clandestine labs, methamphetamine is also available in Africa. This needless to talk about this, the relationship that exists between drugs and conflict. Places where there is conflict, like in the Sahel region, and the weak rule of law, the illicit economics have continued to flourish and use that money for various purposes. So synthetic drugs are shifting drug markets and supply chains. A growing number of laboratories have been detected also in Africa. Synthetic drugs offer criminals several advantages, namely lower operational costs, fewer production impediments, and reduced risks of detection and prosecution because they can be produced closer to the destination. And consumers are facing growing challenges from synthetic drugs owing to unknown pharmacology and harms of the drugs. Lack of pharmacological treatments for these new psychotic substances, therapies, is a problem. The other opioid crisis is the non-medical use of tramadol. This also is continuing to affect countries in parts of Africa and Asia. There is significant individual phenytoin and tramadol seizures in the last reporting cycle. It's also, like I mentioned before, in the Sahel region, you can see it much more. I'm given a warning for 2 minutes, so let me try to capture whatever I can. The other thing is, I just want to mention, this is also important to mention, ketamine could become a mainstream drug in some population groups. It is also, in North Africa. This is something that I would like to also emphasize, is that number of new psychotic substances on the market has increased in 2021 after several years of stabilization. Of the 618 substances reported to be on the global market in 2021, 87 were newly identified. The cumulative number of psychotic substances identified over the last 15 years is 1,165, and currently it is 1,184 substances in 2022. Needless to say, I think this sums up a lot of things that I said before. New drug combinations and the ease of manufacturing and is a growing challenge for monitoring and treating drug use. And we have, Unga, Navope, and all that also exists here in South Africa. And increased digital connectivity has made things much more easier for operation of darknet marketplaces catering to illicit trade in drugs through social media platforms and encrypted communication applications. And one another thing is that among the drugs that are bought through the internet, new psychotic substances appear to be the accessed most on specialized internet shops and on the dark web. It is important to balance access and safety with internally controlled drugs. This is the whole point about access and prevention of diversion and non-medical use of controlled substances and drugs. So this is my last slide. So I tried to rush as much as possible. I swallowed quite a lot. I'm sorry about that. But I'll share this presentation considering the time. So after releasing the report, our executive director said this: we are witnessing a continued rise in the number of people suffering from drug use disorders worldwide, while treatment is failing to reach all of those who need it. We know the numbers of people who are increasingly using drugs and the treatment gap that exists. Meanwhile, we need to step up responses against drug trafficking rings that are exploiting conflicts and global crises to expand illicit drug cultivation and production, especially of the synthetic drugs, fueling illicit markets and causing greater harm to people and communities. So thank you very, very much.